Daniel Radcliffe is the most successful child star in all of history, making $95 million off the Harry Potter franchise, but doing so he faced a lot of issues, and this is how he survived child stardom. And the way Daniel Radcliffe got recommended for Harry Potter actually came from Maggie Smith, who did the BBC movie David Copperfield with really young Daniel Radcliffe, and when she was cast for Harry Potter, she actually recommended him, saying he'd be perfect. During pre-production for Harry Potter, the pick for who'd play Harry ultimately went with J.K. Rowling entirely. And the reason for that was because before J.K. Rowling landed a deal with Warner Bros. To make the Harry Potter movies, she actually was in talks with Steven Spielberg and DreamWorks, but they went really badly. And that's because Steven Spielberg made so many demands that made J.K. Rowling go crazy, like having Haley Joel Osment play Harry Potter through a voice role, having the whole thing be animated, condensing the first 3 books into one movie. So because of that, when J.K. Rowling signed with Warner, she made a deal that all the Harry Potter characters had to come from their country of origin in the books, and she'd also get final say for who was playing Harry, Hermione, and Ron. And the moment J.K. Rowling met Daniel Radcliffe, she knew immediately he was the right pick to play Harry Potter, but his family actually said no at first. And that's because Harry Potter was initially supposed to be filmed in Los Angeles, and they also wanted Daniel Radcliffe to sign up for a 7-picture deal, which his parents thought was way too big of a responsibility on a young kid. But then they decided to film the movie in the United Kingdom instead of Los Angeles, and they made Daniel Radcliffe only sign up for a 2-picture deal, so the parents agreed to it. Daniel Radcliffe's parents were actually a big factor for why he was cast, because of director Christopher Columbus, who demanded to meet the parents of all the child actors before he signed any of them. The reason for that is because a decade before Harry Potter, Chris Columbus was actually the director of Home Alone, which was a huge hit, making $477 million on a budget of $18 million, and it led to Macaulay Culkin making $4.5 million off the sequel. But the problem was Kit Culkin, the father of Macaulay Culkin, was this physically and emotionally abusive man who was abusing the entire family and stealing most of Macaulay Culkin's money. In the late 90s, when Macaulay Culkin decided to leave public life saying he was way too stressed out about it and unhappy over his dad, Chris Columbus actually took a lot of personal blame on himself for that. Because Chris Columbus learned the lesson the hard way with Macaulay Culkin, he actually decided to interview Daniel Radcliffe's parents beforehand and ask questions like how much money they expected to spend from their son's earnings, what kind of roles were appropriate, and many more questions to see if they were responsible people. And in the interview, Chris Columbus was actually really impressed by Daniel Radcliffe's parents, where they said they wanted to save 90% of the money their son was making, and because of that, Chris Columbus ultimately endorsed the pick for Daniel Radcliffe, and I think the parents were a huge factor for why Daniel Radcliffe ended up normal. Daniel Radcliffe actually did have this relatively healthy childhood and teen life despite doing the Harry Potter movies and despite the fame, but he said one thing he hated was all these magazines wondering for the moment he'd actually go crazy. The reason was because this was an era of Britney Spears, Aaron Carter, and Lindsay Lohan, where it seemed like every child star or teen star ended up going absolutely crazy in the late 2000s. While Daniel Radcliffe never made it seem like he was going through any issues with the public, he actually revealed years later he was suffering from a massive alcohol addiction during the 6th Harry Potter movie. He explained to people that he was actually showing up drunk on set, but it was a very depressing kind of drunk, so it actually fit the nature of the movie and no one really noticed. Daniel Radcliffe described the whole thing as pressure, where he knew the Harry Potter franchise was coming to an end, and he had so many people say that, oh, the whole world would know him as just Harry Potter, and he'd never book another role again. His logic behind that was actually Mark Hamill, who did the play Amadeus on Broadway after Star Wars ended. When Mark Hamill auditioned to play the movie version of Amadeus, he was told no by the director, saying he was doing a great job, but the problem was nobody would ever see him as anything besides Luke Skywalker, so he was rejected, and the movie ended up being a massive hit. But for Daniel Radcliffe, he did recognize he was having a drinking problem as well as his parents, so he did get some therapy from that, where he made the decision to quit drinking. Still, after Harry Potter ended, Daniel Radcliffe wanted to prove the world he could still have success outside of the Harry Potter franchise and be known as a good actor regardless. Sometimes actors who are typecast into being more the child and teen actor role do some really stupid things, like Elizabeth Berkley, who was known for Saved by the Bell. After Saved by the Bell ended, she became the 90s version of a meme doing the X-rated movie Showgirls, where she completely demeaned herself, being nude for about 15 minutes in the movie, and she actually destroyed her career in the process. Daniel Radcliffe actually did follow that path a little bit, where his next movie was an R-rated film called Woman in Black, but it was a much more dignified role where he kept his clothes on, and also because the budget was small at $17 million, he knew it wasn't going to be that big of a failure. Not only was it not a failure, but it was actually a huge hit, making $129 million on a budget of $17 million, proving to the world that Daniel Radcliffe was more than just Harry. And since that point, Daniel Radcliffe does still act, even though not that regularly, where he mainly does projects that only fit his interests, normally in the indie world. Now Daniel Radcliffe is actually a dad himself, and he said he is taking a break from doing any movies or TV shows to focus on that, and he also doesn't plan on bringing his kid into child acting. Daniel Radcliffe's logic being that child acting is way too much of a risk, where even though him and his co-stars turned out to be very good people, there's just way too many sad cases and he won't put his kid at risk for it. But ultimately, Daniel Radcliffe's story is a really happy one. I think the 2 people that deserve the most thanks are his parents, who did turn out to be these really good people, which other child actors don't have, sadly. And with that, I'm Charles Perrault. Subscribe to learn something.